Hello, everyone. We're just going to give folks a moment or so to log in. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll get started in just a minute. Hello, everyone. We're giving attendees just a moment to log on. We'll get started in a minute, but welcome to today's webinar. Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Leffler. I'm a senior manager for grid decarbonization and markets with the World Resources Institute's PUC Center for the Global Energy Transition. Welcome to our webinar today titled Power Moves, Local Government Strategy for Utility and PUC Collaboration. Next slide, please. If this is your first WRI webinar, welcome. We are a global research-based, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to improve people's lives, protect nature, and halt climate change. We have a staff of over 2,000 people in 13 offices around the world working on topics like energy, water, forests, cities, food, and transportation. Next slide, please. So this is the second in a series of webinars focused on energy sector, local government participation in energy sector decision-making. Our first webinar, titled "The Time is Now, How and Why Local Governments Should Shape the Energy System of the Future," looked at the decision points that state and regional decision makers are facing right now. So in this moment where across the country we are seeing rapidly increasing load growth with high degrees of uncertainty in those projections, that's translating into significant rate increases. So utilities, public utility commissioners, state policymakers, and wholesale market operators are making decisions impacting reliability, affordability, economic growth, clean energy access, equity, and transparency. So the webinar looked at the wide range of kinds of engagement opportunities, things like integrated resource planning, resource procurement, rate cases, generation and transmission, siting and permitting, technical or policy workshops, things like climate resilience planning, but also managing utility relationships and so much more. All of these affect the resources that are procured, the prices paid, economic development opportunities, and general health and safety. So the webinar highlighted how local government voices are critical to ensuring that energy system decisions reflect community needs and priorities. And some examples of what's at stake for local governments are shown here in the box on the right. We also discussed the risks or consequences of local governments not getting involved. And some of those are described in the box on the left. We also had the opportunity to hear from Katie O'Neill from the city of Boise and Heather Bullock from the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, on their experiences getting involved in these kinds of processes. So if you go to the next slide, we have a great agenda today building on that and starting to get into the strategic and tactical considerations of getting engaged. So we'll talk about developing a utility engagement strategy, talk through a framework for identifying utility and PUC engagement opportunities, aligning city goals with engagement opportunities, and considering whether and how to engage. We'll hear perspectives from cities that have used these strategies in their work. And then, of course, we'll have time for Q&A with our speakers before wrapping up and talking about some next steps. One housekeeping note, because of the number of participants we have today, we'll be using the Q&A function. So please drop any questions you have into the Q&A box. We'll answer some of those as we go, and others we'll get to in the Q&A segment. So joining us today, we have some fabulous speakers. So first, I'm joined by Bill Eager. He's the founder and principal of Ethos Sustainability, where he supports local governments and businesses to plan and implement comprehensive energy transition programs through advanced strategy and planning, technical and economic analysis, policy, regulatory and market alignment, and outreach and project implementation. Prior to founding Ethos Sustainability, Bill served 18 years in energy and climate leadership positions with Arlington County, the city of Alexandria, both of those in Virginia, and the city of Cleveland in Ohio. During his local government service, Bill was responsible for leading strategy and execution of utility and regulatory engagement, including 11 electric, natural gas, and water rate distribution system, transmission infrastructure, energy efficiency, and electrification cases, as well as franchise agreement negotiations. Bill has also been instrumental in advancing city engagement with the PJM Interconnection and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as a founding member of the PJM Cities and Communities Coalition. He actively educates and supports city and community utility and regulatory engagement efforts. We're also joined by Evora Glenn, who is an energy specialist for the city of Missoula, where she works to advance the transition to clean energy through local programs and statewide action. Prior to joining the city, Evora worked for the Montana Renewable Energy Association, focused on expanding rural access to solar development, as well as connecting renewable energy with transportation and agriculture. She has a master's degree in resource conservation from the University of Montana, where she studied the intersection of food, energy, and water systems. Last, but certainly not least, we have Nicole Antonopoulos. She's the sustainability director for the city of Flagstaff in Arizona. She has led the city's sustainability and climate resilience initiative since 2007. She established Flagstaff's sustainability program, guiding policies and programs that advance energy efficiency, climate adaptation, and community well-being. Under her leadership, the residential energy programs have reduced consumption by 22 million kilowatt hours, saving about $2.3 million, protected 2,700 acres of open space, and created 5 community gardens. Nicole has secured over $10 million in funding for municipal and community projects and developed a renewable energy portfolio that provides 10% of the city's energy needs. As a recognized leader and technical advisor, she translates climate science into practical action and strengthens both the city and the broader community. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Bill to dive in.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate the introductions, and I look forward to a great conversation today on kind of working through developing a utility engagement strategy, and then having some great conversation with Evora and Nicole about experiences in Missoula and Flagstaff and how they've taken these frameworks and implemented them locally within their communities and across their states. Next slide, please. Before we dive into working through the framework, we wanted to offer an opportunity to collect some feedback from you all, just to learn more about where you come from and how do you your local governments feel about your kind of capabilities regarding state public utility regulatory process engagement. So here we have a scale from kind of unfamiliar to expert level familiarity. If you could kind of indicate where you think your local government staff may find itself with regards to your familiarity with these regulatory processes. And we'll just give a moment for you to offer your response. Okay, we'll give it maybe 10 more seconds here. Okay, if we could go ahead and start to close the poll. If you have any final responses, please do so, and before we move on. Okay, well, let's start to unpack a strategy development here. And we're working with WRI and kind of leveraging insights from engagement with cities across the United States and observing how cities and businesses and organizations engage in with their utilities and with utility regulatory processes. We've laid out a kind of a multi-step process here to kind of build a framework around how you engage with utility and ultimately engage in utility regulatory processes within a state or a public service commission or a state utility commission. And so today we're going to talk through, how you identify opportunities for engagement, how you align those opportunities with city goals, how you should think about, conducting a benefit of cost analysis of whether or not it's in your best interest to engage and provide perspectives of your local community or your local government in a utility or utility regulatory process. We'll talk about pathways you may want to think about, engagement pathways of how you may articulate your perspective from a local government or your local community, how you think about and maybe think about gaining buy-in from your leadership, be it your executives, be it your council or boards, and others across your local government and in your community. And then we'll also talk briefly about implementing your strategy, giving kind of setting you up for what are the next steps after you think and then kind of work through this strategy development process. Now, we want to be clear that these are the building blocks we believe are most important to consider as you're thinking about opportunities to kind of strategy development through to implementation. But they're being mixed depending on your state, depending on your utility. There may be some mix and match of these in various orders, but again, these serve as somewhat of the foundational building blocks we think you should need to be taking into consideration. It's also to say that through each one of these kind of steps, again, whatever order they ultimately find themselves, is that you go through a process to evaluate whether it's in your best interest as a local government or as your community as a whole to proceed any further. There may be reasons why you come across a choice not to continue to engage with utility or in a regulatory process. And so just keeping in mind that every time you pass kind of through some of these stages to really think critically about whether it's in your best interest as a local government or local community to engage any further. Next step. Okay, so as a matter of kind of starting out, where are the engagement opportunities that you should be thinking about? And unfortunately, many of kind of whether it be an issue facing a utility or kind of an issue that's before a state public service commission or public utilities commission may or may not be kind of fully transparent to you. And so you have to actively be seeking out where information lies and kind of where these opportunities exist. And so you have to be actively monitoring on a regular basis. And where places you might think about approaching kind of finding this information is often state utility commissions or public service commission websites have the ability to kind of search through cases or issues that are currently being considered by your utility commission. You may think about looking at your utility's website. The utility will have kind of a listing somewhere, shape, or form in their website repository, information on current cases or projects or issues that they may be contemplating that will have kind of further information that you can rely on. There are news outlets that follow state utility commission or public service commission proceedings, or there may be local advocacy groups who are active in these conversations, who are kind of providing write-ups or information. And so keeping track of local news or newsletters across your state or in your community is another great place to look for where these issues might pop up. There's also national organizations, Power Lines and many others, who are actively tracking cases around rates and other kind of issues around clean energy and transmission planning that you can possibly rely on. And then there are also information services that are emerging. We list one here, no endorsement of Halcyon, but it's another, way to kind of track cases or utility issues across states or jurisdictions or utilities. Next slide, please. And when you find a case, let's say it's a rate case, or maybe there's a transmission issue or a project relative to some form of generation, clean energy, otherwise, you start to think about kind of taking into account the information you find. If it's a rate case, for example, you might find an application at your state corporation commission. You start to need to digest, how does this case actually impact my community? Are rates going up? Is there investments in infrastructure that we should be aware of? Who benefits from some of these questions that are before utility or before our utility commission, and how do they benefit, frankly? Is it a cost issue? Is it a benefit to reliability? Or maybe not necessarily a benefit to reliability, maybe it's imposing impacts to reliability. What are case schedules? These are questions that you may think about, the cases in the past, or there's been a hearing already. You may not have ability to really meaningfully engage any further, but if there's something forthcoming, you may think about how that fits within your community's timelines for action. Who else is involved? Are community stakeholders, their businesses, who else is bringing forward their own perspective with regards to engaging in a utility conversation or a regulatory conversation, and how may that impact how you think about whether or not your voice is necessarily important to be heard, or what are the impacts that might come from the many stakeholders that might be thinking about or engaging in some of these conversations. And then finally, one thing we'll be thinking about here in a moment more and directly is, what perspective does my local government bring to this conversation that may be unique, that is important to us, be it related to cost, be it reliability, be it for project planning. Where do we bring a unique voice to these broader utility conversations? Next slide, please. And so we note that there are many engagement opportunities. We list those are kind of common, if you will, in states relative to regulatory processes at the Public Service Commission or Public Utilities Commission. And these range from integrated resource planning, the types of generation that supply your state's electricity, to how distribution planning occurs in your local communities, to transmission planning, to rates that drive the cost of electricity, or other types of cases or opportunities that might exist relative to electrification or energy efficiency, or even just how you think about your broader relationship with the utility through franchise agreements. And each one of these aligns somewhat, generally speaking, with a variety of different community goals that we see most often. Here's a list of how common utility or community goals, be they sustainability, affordability, reliability, resiliency, equity, may align with many of the cases or types of issues that are considered by a commission or by a utility. And these are not meant to be exhaustive. Every state has a slight variation in how they might think about rate cases and the issues that they bring up, as one example, or transmission planning. But to give you some generality of the types of community goals that might align with certain types of cases that your state or utility might be taking into consideration, try to kind of line those up so that you can start to think about how your community goals align with the opportunities before you. Next slide, please. And so with that, just to give some little bit of example here, the recent case that was filed in Arizona by Arizona Public Service Commission or Public Service, has a case where they're asking for rates to increase anywhere from 6 to 30%. And so those communities that are impacted by this particular case might think about, what is electricity prices? What are they going to look like in the next couple of years? And is that important to our community? Does that challenge questions that we might have around strategic goals around affordability or affordable housing? How are rates set, and how are rates distributed across different types of rate classes, be it residential or commercial, and how does the changes in rates ultimately impact, again, affordability or economic development or other issues? And then, frankly, just how does these issues as they come up, thinking about how our goals as local communities, how do we bring a voice and the impacts of these types of cases relative to meeting our strategic goals? And so, if ultimately, and this is an important where we want to minimize those costs or minimize impact to our community, we may think about a rate case as an opportunity to start to advance our perspective and how we might think about bringing forward evidence that suggests the challenges that our local communities might face with this particular type of case, in this case, a rate case. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about types of engagement opportunities and how they align with types of community goals. We want to get a sense of, where you think your community, your local government, may best, or where your community's goals might best align with many of these types of cases. And so you could pick your top two. We've got a sense of where you think your goals might align with some of these engagement opportunities. And we'll just take a moment to wait for your answers. We'll give it maybe 5 more seconds. So if you haven't locked in your answers, please do so now. Okay, if we could close up the poll here, we'll move on. So next up, as we think through this, the framework, the strategic framework process, it would be really important for you to weigh the benefits and costs of pursuing some form of engagement. Largely speaking, and generally speaking, the benefit cost analysis may be more qualitative than quantitative in nature, though we'll talk briefly here about kind of some more hard numbers that you may want it to be thinking about. But bottom line is, when you think about the benefits of your approaching some form of engagement with a utility or in a public utility commission case, you need to think about what is the unique perspective that our local government or our local community can bring to bear in this conversation. Again, whether it's rates, whether it be distribution infrastructure planning, whether it be an energy efficiency case, what do we have in the way of our strategic goals that brings a unique and valuable perspective to bear? You might want to think about, what would happen if we didn't engage, and what would be the impacts to our community? Is that framed as a benefit, or is that ultimately a cost? And so you have to kind of weigh these questions somewhat across this continuum of benefits and costs. And then ultimately, thinking about the types of stakeholders that will be involved, again, whether it be environmental advocates or businesses, how those all weigh in kind of the broader set of voices that may bring the local government community and the local government and the community's perspective as either a benefit or a cost, and manage those relationships, if you will. It's also to say that depending on the type of engagement pathway that you pursue, which we'll speak to here in a moment, that may require some form of external resources, be it legal or expertise that you may or may not have from your local government staff that you may have to invest in, and whether the direct costs that may come about that, or there are other information resources that would be important for you to have that you may need to invest in. And we'll talk a little bit about, how benefits and costs may align with coalitions and partners, and ultimately, weighing, again, what are the benefits are in engaging in a utility or a public utility commission regulatory case, and ultimately what are the costs that we need to manage, and finding a means of balancing those two to understand whether you should proceed further within your engagement strategy process. Next, please. And so with that, you may come to find that it's important to your local government to proceed with engaging in a rate case or an integrated resource plan or some form of utility decision process. And there's a number of pathways you may consider, and you may do so as an individual jurisdiction or individual local government, but you ultimately may also think about engaging in the context of a coalition or with some other public or private or not-for-profit partners. And so thinking about how you may want to take forward your engagement strategy, again, individually or in some form of partnership. And there are a number of ways you might think about engaging and pathways you may think about pursuing engagement. Some of those may include lesser direct approaches, and that is if it's not a conflict of interest, you may think about with your public utility commissioner or service commissions, be it the commissioners or staff. You may think about working directly with utility representatives, be it staff to staff or engaging with their executive leadership. You may think about engaging in stakeholder processes that may be available as part of some form of case or some form of decision making. There's opportunities often to submit public comments or serve as a public witness in some form of public hearing process. And if you choose to go more in depth and bring a more direct means of engagement in a public service commission or public utilities case, you may think about direct intervention, which is much more intensive of a process, but certainly more meaningful at the end of the day to bring your community's perspectives to bear. There's other opportunities to work through partners in the community as kind of a through some proxy process to advocate for your community to offer comments or perspectives. You may also think about leveraging media opportunities where those may be available and strategically important. Next slide, please. And then next step within kind of your broader engagement strategy development process is critically is gaining support and buy-in from your local government's leadership and important stakeholders. So if it's your city or county manager or executive or senior leadership, really, I mean, you have to take all of this information that you've been working on thus far, from identifying opportunities to evaluating benefits and costs, and really understanding where is the strategic alignment with your community's goals. Again, strategic plans or your sustainability plan or affordability and equity plan. How are the issues being heard and contemplated aligning with your community's ultimate goals and vision for the future. And you're going to have to, if it is some form of direct intervention or some form of, there is some form of need of some resource, external counsel, expert witness, information, you will have to kind of figure out the budget implications. And also to say that if there's opportunity, if it's a rate case and there's costs are going up as a function of increased investment in utility infrastructure, that may have a budget implication onto its own accord. And so understanding what are the budget implications and the resource requirements that your executive leadership will need to understand for you to gain their support. And then ultimately, a case may have impact on service delivery to your community, reflecting public works or managing affordable housing or meeting some other strategic goal. The issues that may be contemplated by a commission or taken up by a utility may both relieve a challenge or may impose a challenge, and you have to think about how you might present that to your leadership. Ultimately to achieve your organizational goals. And then also gaining buy-in from your council or board. These are, their currency, your policymaking body's currency is engagement in kind of relationships with community writ large, be it individual community members, businesses, utilities, is really, frankly, getting buy-in that you are bringing forward an important conversation to these utility engagement processes and pathways in order to meet their ultimate goal of improving your ultimate community, improving your relationship with their community members. You have to work with your municipal attorney. These are largely legal processes in many ways. And so working with your attorney to not only work through the legal process that you may need to encounter with some of these public service commission or utility commission processes, but also their goal is to minimize, legal or financial or political risks to your community. And so as there may be any of those legal, political, financial risks, having your attorneys buy-in and support is critically important. And then finally, working through, community advisory committees or commissions, providing ultimately backing that you as staff have the wherewithal and the support in order to proceed with engagement on behalf of the community, and just having broader community support and through these types of again, energy sustainability or climate commissions is another important buy-in opportunity to gain support in this process. So before that, move on. We just wanted to ask you, regarding support from your leadership or policymakers, attorneys, community, what do you think is your biggest challenge to building such buy-in? If you could just provide a short answer here, we'll give about 15 seconds to hear some of the responses from the attendees. Let's give it maybe 3 more seconds. Okay, if we can close the poll. Now, before we proceed to hear more from our friends in Missoula and in Flagstaff, we wanted to leave you with, great, we've built this strategy by way of identifying an opportunity to kind of align our city goals, work through a benefit and cost analysis, understand what are the pathways we may seek to engage and provide our perspective, and then ultimately gaining support. What is the next step? How do we take this forward? And frankly, every type of issue, again, a case before a commission will slightly be different, but we would offer some general approaches to next steps. And first, highly recommend just getting organized. This is ultimately, kind of building a team internally, be it use your sustainability or energy or climate staff, and partner with other experts within your local government's community or departments and organization, legal, public works, affordable housing, whatever the issues that you may need to address, is bringing that team together to work through the process for engagement and bring all perspectives to the table. If you need to identify and procure resources, again, outside counsel or an expert witness or some form of other information resource, working through that kind of project or tactical element of getting those resources at your avail. You'll have to understand kind of the process that you may need to follow. If it's a regulatory commission case, there's a strict timeline, and understanding how that aligns with the timeline you need to work through in order to respond accordingly and provide the information that your community is seeking to bring to the conversation, kind of within those strict confines of the case that's being heard. And ultimately, many of these types of engagement opportunities cover a wide range of issues. Again, we heard sustainability, affordability, to equity, and everything in between. And ultimately, you need to focus yourself down to what are the most critical goals and how do we bring the most value to the conversation on behalf of our local government and community. Focus those and bring the most strategic evidence that you can in order to advocate on behalf of your community's goals and outcomes. Where there's opportunities to align with allies who may otherwise be participating in the case, other stakeholders, advocacy groups, et cetera, that align with your perspectives, is to find those alignments and build upon one another's approaches and kind of find kind of both strong and kind of not so weak partnerships as you navigate through these engagement opportunities. Also, just recommend that you observe and practice. These, often engaging with utility is not intuitive to local governments, and so to observe either other local governments who have found success in engaging with their utility or a public utility commission process, observe how they've approached that, build on templates or experience, and then ultimately, because if you do intervene, for example, you may need to be subject to kind of witness testimony, the interesting processes that kind of are quasi-judicial in nature. And so you may need to practice how you present yourself and present your community's perspectives in the context of a utility case or utility regulatory case. Next up, just take action. Not lost on anybody. Execute what you've built here, and that is, again, the opportunities you've identified, how they align with your goals, and then ultimately providing the most strategic and value-added perspective on behalf of your community. And where you can, just note again, leverage partnerships and resources where they may be available. And then ultimately and critically is keeping your leadership informed. Again, these processes related to a Public Utilities Commission case or otherwise are not necessarily intuitive to many local governments. And so as they're managing political or legal or financial risks through these processes, or it may, frankly, even successes, just keeping your leadership aware. It's also not an opportunity to educate your local government leadership as you work through this, particularly if you're new to engaging in with your utility or in a regulatory context. And then finally, you may be finding yourself engage in a specific issue, whether it be a rate case or transmission planning, distribution planning, but keep in mind the long run and keep in mind that the goal here too is to build capacity amongst your local government staff to continually engage over time. And so use these opportunities to strengthen your staff knowledge and capabilities, build relationships with advocacy groups or even your utility, frankly. Not everything has to be contentious. You could be finding yourself supporting the utilities outcomes. And so build relationships amongst all parties that you possibly can in order to kind of take forward your perspectives of your local government. You really want to institutionalize these engagement processes. Again, if you're thinking for the long term and you want to continue over time to be advocating on behalf of your community, institutionalize from everything from how you identify a case to work through benefit and cost analysis to how you engage your leadership. And then ultimately, just you want to build in opportunities to celebrate successes where you can, where you've identified where your perspective have moved the needle in driving an outcome, positive outcome for your meeting your city's goals in the context of engaging with utilities. Celebrate those successes. With that, we are going to move on to hear from our colleagues Avora Glenn from Missoula, Montana, on their work to develop an ARCA strategy or a strategy development for how they've intervened or engaged with the utility in Montana. And then we'll be hearing from Nicole Antonopoulos regarding the work in Flagstaff before we proceed on to questions and answers. And so with that, I turn it over to Avora.
Thanks for that introduction again, Bill. Yeah, I'm going to provide a really high-level overview of our work with our utility, and I'm excited to do so today and follow up on Bill's really in-depth overview of various processes. So at the city of Missoula, as Bill and others have introduced me, I'm an energy specialist. I work at the city of Missoula, and we have a variety of climate and sustainability goals. So we have a goal of carbon neutrality by 2050 for our Missoula urban area. We have a goal of carbon neutrality in our municipal operations. And we have a goal of 100% clean electricity in our Missoula urban area. And that's a goal to achieve by 2030. So those key climate goals were really the impetus for reaching out to work with our utility. In our Missoula urban area, about 95% of the electricity that serves our community comes from our investor-owned utility, Northwestern Energy. The other 5% comes from a rural electric cooperative, but the majority of their power is already renewable. So we tend to focus directly with on working with towards our goals with Northwestern Energy, that investor-owned utility. They, again, provide 95% of our electricity, but only about 60% was clean energy or clean electricity as of 2024. So we focus on that gap, that 40%-ish gap between what is already clean and renewable in their portfolio and what we need to achieve to reach our 100% clean electricity goal. And that led us to reaching out to work with the utility in the first place. Part of the reason for that is because in Montana, we have some pretty difficult limitations when it comes to securing clean electricity through distributed generation we build in our community or by procuring renewable energy from another source. So Northwestern Energy is a regulated monopoly. So wherever in our community or within their territory, we are obligated to buy our power from the utility. We don't have choice in securing where that electricity comes from. So that precludes programs like community choice aggregation. And then when we think about distributed generation to install local rooftop solar, community solar, we have pretty limiting net metering legislation that precludes aggregate net metering or virtual net metering, which can really unlock community solar programs. And our net metering legislation also has a 50 kilowatt cap, which is plenty for our residential the residential folks in our community, but the majority of businesses, industry, institutions, that cap doesn't come anywhere close to allowing them to install the amount of on-site generation they would need to power their operations on an annual basis. So knowing that there are those restraints around securing clean power from other sources or producing it in our local community, we did recognize we need to work with the utility directly while we continue to explore solutions to those other challenges, right? We're doing both. This work really began in 2018 when we worked with a community partner and with Missoula County to draft a options report on how we would achieve 100% clean electricity. And that report led to adoption of a joint resolution between Missoula County and the city of Missoula to secure 100% clean electricity for our Missoula urban area. And once we adopted that commitment, we worked with the utility, Northwestern Energy, to create a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, that outlines a variety of ways we agreed to work together to achieve that 100% clean electricity goal. One of the main strategies that came out of that collaborative work was developing a green tariff, or what we're calling the Green Power Program, for the state of Montana and all of Northwestern Energy's territory. So that leads up to where we are engaging now. We continue to work on design of that program. We're about 4 years in, so it's taking some time. It's our top priority to get that program done and operational. While we work on that program, we've also been tracking the utilities' integrated resource planning processes and their ongoing rate cases at the Public Service Commission. And that's really significant because Northwestern Energy, in a 2-year period, has acquired, announced that they will acquire, or has brought online generation equaling 767 megawatts, all from fossil fuels. And for some context, that's the equivalent, about 86% of their existing owned capacity. So it's a huge increase, a huge investment. And again, that's all fossil fuel generation. At the same time, the utility has recently announced plans to serve 2 new data centers in the state of Montana. And they project that the increased demand of those data centers would lead to an overall increase in their electricity demand of 26% by 2030, which is staggering. The national average for electricity demand has been an increase of about 2% year over year for the last 3 decades. So 26% increase in 5 years is massive. And that prompts questions for us about how are they going to meet that demand? And we want to be involved in those conversations. We want to be able to participate and engage and shape that future of energy investment. One of our challenges at the city of Missoula is that we do have a limited climate staff. We have a broad range of climate goals, and I am our only energy specialist who works on our 100% clean electricity goal. So what we do is we partner a lot with other communities across the state. I've mentioned Missoula County. We partner with the city of Bozeman. We also partner with industry groups and other advocacy organizations to decide when and how we engage in the Montana legislative session or Public Service Commission rate cases or utility integrated resource planning processes. And a big part of that is we want to avoid duplicating our efforts when it's not helpful. And then at the same time, identify when we could magnify our collective voices by working together when that would be useful. So we try and coordinate and collaborate to leverage our capacity in those 2 ways. One of the things that we're also thoughtful about in Montana is that in our political environment, there are many elected leaders that are not receptive to arguments around the causes and impacts of climate change. So in Montana, when we talk about renewable energy generation, achieving 100% clean electricity, we often lean into the other benefits that renewable energy offers. We talk about cost savings, we talk about energy independence, we talk about economic development and job growth. We have really great resources for both solar and wind, and those could be great opportunities for our rural communities, especially. We also talk about how renewable energy, especially distributed renewable energy, could support resilience when there are grid disruptions. So we lean into those because we know that they have more purchase with the folks that we're trying to reach. The city of Missoula also has a very specific voice. We're known for being active on climate action. We're known for having ambitious climate goals. And so another consideration that's important to us is assessing whether our voice would be additive to the conversation, whether it will be impactful and beneficial for us to weigh in specifically, or if we can let other voices take precedence that may be more impactful. So that's another thing that we consider. As a brief overview of our kind of process to date, but if I were to kind of summarize and I think of what has worked well for us and what I would encourage other municipalities to try when engaging with your own utilities is to, first of all, try to understand your utilities' motivations and priorities. So, what is their business model? Are they an investor-owned utility? Are they a co-op? Are they vertically integrated? Are they a distribution utility? How do they make a profit? What are their primary concerns when it comes to integrating renewable energy and storage into the grid, into their system? How does that impact their operations? And another piece of advice I would share that's worked well for us is also trying to understand organizational culture and structure of the utility you work with, right? So how do they make decisions? Um, who all in the organization has that decision-making authority? Are those folks already on board with your goals? Do you need them to be on board in order to make progress? Who are the right people to work with in that organization to make progress on your goals or to influence their planning? And lastly, I would just lean back again on this foundation of collaboration and coordination with other partners, municipalities, industry groups, large customers, advocacy groups. Leaning on those partnerships can allow you to leverage your combined capacity. You can also integrate a variety of diverse perspectives that can help you be more effective, can think of things in different ways. And lastly, it just allows you to have a broader coalition of customers for the utility to respond to, which does change the dynamic a bit. So that's a really brief overview of how we're approaching utility engagement in Missoula. And I'm also just looking forward to the Q&A opportunity to answer any questions if there are some. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Evora. Just as a reminder, we do have the Q&A open. If you want to place your questions, we are running short on time, but we'll look to either answer in the Q&A or if we have a second or two towards the end, answer those in real time. So Nicole, share a little bit more about your work in Flagstaff and building internal buy-in with your organization.
Great. Thanks so much, Bill, and big thanks to WRI for the invitation. And I'll try to go quickly. I have a feeling there are going to be some good questions in the chat. But hello, everyone. I am Nicole Antonopoulos, and I'm the Sustainability Director for the City of Flagstaff. And I've had the honor to be in this position since 2007. So much of what I'm going to share with you this afternoon really just highlights a long road, if you will, to working to build internal accountability and build collaborations across this energy space. Similar to Missoula, Arizona has complexities in the energy space, and we are a regulated state, so we have limited opportunities to navigate this landscape. The city of Flagstaff does have a carbon neutrality goal for the municipal organization and the Flagstaff community to achieve carbon neutrality by the year 2030. And I'll touch on that a little bit toward the end of my talking points. But I want to focus right now just on that internal accountability. And the way that I really approached bringing internal accountability towards energy was focusing on our financial systems first and foremost. Here at the city, when I started quite a while ago, our financial systems were not set up to encourage either energy or water consumption accountability. These were bills that were directly paid, and so there was a significant disconnect between consumption and budget for each internal division. So, to increase internal engagement and ownership, my first area of focus was making our data accessible to everyone. Prior to my joining the city, that data was held by accounts receivable, and divisions did not actually investigate, well, how much actually are we spending on energy? So I spent several years, yes, years, cleaning up and organizing the municipality's utility data to build that internal credibility, as well as strengthen collaborations with our electric utility. And one of the easiest and most impactful steps in shifting the organizational culture on how we address energy consumption and encourage that ownership was developing an energy and water consumption platform that provided monthly use and cost that was accessible to everyone by building and by accounts. And of course, I prioritized working with our high energy users, specifically our water services division. And for those of you unfamiliar with Flagstaff, we sit at 7,000 feet in elevation. And our main source of water is through pumping, so through very deep wells. So we have an incredibly high electric use for our water services division. And then from there, I focused on establishing direct engagement with the electric utility. So I was really having simultaneous tracks of engagement to build trust and earn respect. And working with the electric utility, I focused on cleaning up our electric accounts for accurate accounting. It was extremely time consuming, and I kid you not, it took more than 2 years. And it was truly, though, our first deep collaboration with the electric utility to step into the space of how serious the city was going to start taking its energy consumption and specific electric focus. We then moved towards energy efficiencies and multi-phase power purchase agreements around 2011. And this really shifted our internal conversations from just energy accountability to energy efficiency, as well as renewable energy development, but in the space of long-term fiscal stability and cost savings. And this was a solid pathway for me to earn trust within the organization and highlight the benefits of a strong energy management plan. From there, those collaborations just started to take off within the organization. And I want to highlight that working, as many on the call know, working in sustainability, we're generalists in the simplest of terms. And prior to my position and then the building of the sustainability division, the city didn't have cross-divisional champions. And so there was also this, when I mentioned earlier that cultural shift also includes the fact that I will be, or members of the sustainability team, champions for the entire organization and for the entire community to save money and stabilize costs. So as I shared, I really focused on our high energy users and working with our water services team to bring on a diversity of our portfolio that is saving them thousands of dollars every month. We have also focused a lot on collaborations, and as a relatively small city in the northern part of the state, we don't hold much influence with the utility as a large user, so collaboration is key. I will say our working relationship with the utility has had its ups and downs, changes in leadership and energy needs, and as Bill reminded us, or well, reminded me, but introduced to the webinar attendance, our electric utility has a significant rate case in to the Arizona Corporation Commission. But those changes in leadership and changes in energy needs have significantly influenced how we as a city organization collaborate with our community and then with our partners across the state. I will say at the peak of our alignment with the electric utility, when we had similar goals, we did enter into a 5-year memorandum of understanding that honored both of our agencies' commitments to clean energy, communication, and collaboration. And from there, we actually helped our electric utility build its Green Power Partners program to allow for its customers to purchase clean energy credits, which we were their first. And, our Arizona Public Service had committed to, in 2020, to obtaining 65% of its energy from clean sources by 2030. Unfortunately, in August, they walked back on that goal. And which requires the total elimination of emissions and replaced it with less ambitious carbon neutrality targets. So for collaboration, our alignment with partners across the state of Arizona is incredibly important. And just looking at the time, I'm just going to mention 2 really impactful collaborations that we here in Flagstaff have been spearheading and working with partners across the region. The first is our Solar United Neighbors, essentially bulk purchase for residential solar. We are in our 5th year of that collaboration to utilize opportunities to reduce costs by bulk purchase. And then probably the one at the forefront, specifically today, because I'm going to City Council for approval, is our Arizona Consortium to pursue a virtual power purchase agreement to procure renewable energy or clean energy credits at a more cost competitive rate than our electric utility is currently offering through its Green Power Partners programming. And this is a collaboration with municipal organizations in the state of Arizona, as well as universities. So it's a fantastic opportunity for cross-sector collaboration and involvement to work on moving the needle towards our shared goals. I'll go ahead and leave it at that. So we have 2 minutes, I think, for questions and answers. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. I'm going to really take panelist privilege here. We're going to move to some of the closeout material real quick, and then for those who have interest in sticking around, if Nicole and Evra could stay around for maybe 5 minutes, we can entertain a few questions. Or if you have the opportunity to insert questions in the Q&A, we can get back to you after the webinar. So I'm going to pass it over to Kelly to finish us out with wrap up and next steps, and then we'll move to questions and answers briefly thereafter. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So we do have one final poll question, and we're going to leave that up for you to answer while we go through some of the next steps. But this is asking which types of practical resources would be most beneficial to supporting your local government's engagement in states, Public Utility Commission, or energy regulatory proceedings. And this is to help us ensure that we are providing tools and information that is most valuable to you. So if we can go to the next slide while that stays up. Fantastic. So first of all, huge thank you to Bill, Evora, and Nicole for your insights and for your time. Our next webinar is tentatively titled Partnerships Plugged In, Regional Coalitions Advancing Energy Policy, and scheduled for Wednesday, December 10th. This will talk about using collaboration to overcome resourcing challenges and to reinforce impact. Details and registration information will be available soon, and we'll send it out to all of you following this webinar. We could go to the next slide. I just want to highlight that this webinar series is part of a broader project that WRI is doing to help local governments and communities engage in electricity sector decision-making. So we've been meeting with local governments, and we'll be using that information from those conversations, as well as information from the polls today to shape resources and educational materials going forward. So more to come. We're happy to have you involved. And if you could go to the next slide. We would love your feedback and your questions. So we have contact information here for Bill and my colleague Lacey, who leads our city engagement work. You can also sign up for our newsletter, but we would love to hear from you. So thank you for your time. And I think we'll go back to Bill now for a few minutes for Q&A if folks do want to stick around for just a few more minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And then, yeah, appreciate if you do have any questions, just put those in the Q&A here for a moment. And Evora and Nicole, if you have a few minutes, just I wanted to maybe ask you briefly, what where have you found the most success so far with engaging with your utilities, either directly with staff to staff or relative to any either public utility commission or public service commission engagement that your respective local governments have engaged in? Where's been successes that you've seen most valuable to meeting your community goals?
I'll be happy to chime in. I think one of the things that has been the most helpful and successful is when we've been able to literally sit down with the utility and not our regional representative, but the high level decision makers to really emphasize the need to focus on rather than blanket programming, the fact that every one of their larger customers has unique needs. I would say that probably was the most beneficial era with our utility, is just really moving forward. And we have aggressive goals here in Flagstaff, and one of the first in the state to follow those goals. So that was super helpful for us.
Yeah, I would echo, those direct conversations, especially with folks in the utility that have more understanding of the broader organizational structure, perhaps have more decision-making authority, are able to provide richer responses around their concerns, their challenges, and meeting our goals. We've experienced those conversations to be the most productive and have led to actual progress. So having those, and those can be face-to-face. Montana's pretty big, so our face-to-face meetings take a while to get to. So we also have them virtually, and being able to talk to those folks has been super helpful in moving our programs forward.
I will say, if I may add on to that, it's not necessarily easy to get those meetings. And that it took years to be able to actually be invited up to headquarters and the top floor.
Yeah, so interesting maybe to follow up on there, that thread is, how do you keep track? We talked briefly about kind of actively monitoring commission websites or your utility or news media, et cetera. How do each one of your jurisdictions track the issues that your utility is considering or the commission in your respective states is addressing? What's your process, and how have you institutionalized that process within each one of your jurisdictions?
I could start off. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issues, so I apologize if you can't hear me clearly. But I'll just quickly say that, oh, I'm sorry. I totally blanked with my connectivity issue. Could you remind me? I was about to speak.
Yeah, the question is, how do you go about tracking either issues before
Yes.
your utility or between your commission? How do you institutionalize that within your respective jurisdictions?
Yeah, so at the city, like I said, I'm our only energy specialist. So I sign up for all the alerts, et cetera, from our Public Service Commission, our various interim committees at the legislature, our various subcommittees, the House and Senate during the legislative session. But I also tap into our advocacy network that are experts at tracking those kind of proceedings. And they often have, I think we have a group in Montana that posts weekly newsletters to let you know how things are proceeding during the session when the session is happening, but also during critical rate cases. And so tapping into that network of other contacts, of other partners has been really helpful for me to be able to stay on top of things at the city.
And Bill, yeah, I would echo that as well. We're fortunate to rely and have great working relationships with nonprofits that are really monitoring the Corporation Commission here in Arizona, as well as a wealth of partners across the state. And we act as the point person, if you will, for the city organization. So we bring forward all that messaging, both to our city management as well as our elected officials.
Great. Well, thank you. We're over time and wanted to respect each of your schedules. I know you're extraordinarily busy people and have a lot of work to do in your respective jurisdictions, but just want to say thank you for all the insights today, the wisdom, and kind of just sharing your experience in engaging with utility or more broadly with your regulatory commission or legislature on these significant energy decisions that are being made in each one of your states. So with that, just say again, thank you. Thank you for all the attendees, and look forward to joining you all in the next webinar in December. So thank you very much, and everybody have a great day.